Was the fatal Grenfell Tower fire here in northwest London a tragic accident or a case of corporate manslaughter? Some say the leaders of the Kensington and Chelsea Council and the Tenancy Management Organisation should be charged with negligence. Others claim the Conservative government's austerity programme cut fire services and housing safety regulations. Still others say the external cladding spread the fire at horrific speed. The 24-storey Grenfell Tower, built over 40 years ago, was recently refurbished for about £9 million. But the newly installed external cladding is widely blamed for spreading the devastating blaze. An investigation will assess if building regulations had been violated. The firm responsible denies the cladding was banned. Meanwhile, there has been criticism of the government for poor coordination immediately after the devastating fire, leaving dozens of families homeless and without their possessions. Prime Minister Theresa May was also attacked for seeming uncaring when facing the now homeless residents. John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, criticised the government's response, and a Labour MP, David Lammy, reported public suspicions of a cover-up, demanding that the Prime Minister and Metropolitan Police quickly seize all relevant documents. While the Conservative leader of Kensington Council seemed to suggest residents were to blame, the residents themselves said sprinklers were not fitted. The leader responded by saying residents didn't want the disruption which installing sprinklers would have caused. The British public has watched on, unsure of who or what to believe. Why were the safety concerns of residents ignored? And how do people feel about the government's response to this tragedy? Simple questions with important answers. Let's start with this. Who does the public suspect is to blame for the Grenfell Tower fire? And if proved, what should happen to those responsible? Here's what we learned.
Absolutely, the government. Whoever put that pretty stuff around there, that made it an inferno. And the reason that the fire brigade told them to stay in there is because protocol says stay in your apartment. You know why I say stays in your apartment? Because they haven't got that inferno. You know, when you see a building and someone's had a fire, it'll be one window that's black, and that's the house that burnt, right? Right. But because they put an inferno, the fire went up, across, and down. They were trapped. How? Where'd they get out? You're in a building that's got a fire doing that, and they're telling you to go down the stairs, and they're trying to go down the stairs, and their feet are burning. So we're doing this for who? Who are we doing it for? Everyone's died.
The unethical use of a combustible material on a building of that scale, of that height, with a residential building, to me, it verges on criminal negligence.
The blame has to be from the top, because those are the people who gave someone a contract, paid him millions to do a job. He had enough money to do a perfect job. He didn't do that. He pocketed the money, paid another friend a little bit of money, and then it went on three hands, and then this is what you got, a botched job.
I think it's all due to the cladding. I'm sorry, because I've lived there for 41 years, so it's definitely the cladding.
I don't know, personally I would say the government, as everyone else would say, because as you can see, I don't think personally they spent 10 million on a plastic refurbishment, so personally I think they planned it all along just to get the rich people in, as everyone else is saying, and to move the poor people out.
The fire burned at 1,000 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, meaning that it's very difficult to gain any evidence from that fire, number one. Number two is, what's more important than that is the fact that those who allowed the fire to escalate should be held accountable. Those who actually were involved in the refurbishment and in the building of and the refurbishment of the building. They cut out a £10 million deal with the council in order to build that building, and they didn't even bother adding 5k more just to add on fireproof cladding.
Ultimately, the responsibility is with Nicholas Paget-Brown, right, as the councillor of that area. The council, Kensington and Chelsea Council, are ultimately responsible for owning those buildings. That building in particular, but the buildings around there in that borough. Some of them have been sold off to housing associations or some private renters, but they're ultimately responsible for the upkeep of that building. And the council is responsible, he is responsible, even though now he's tried to leave. But there'll be people who've made decisions all the way through. From Ryden, the company who did the refurbishment, you know, 10 million was given, 8 million was spent. So where's the rest of that money gone? That could have been spent on the more expensive cladding, which would have cost an extra £5,000 to have, you know, fire safe, fire retardant cladding instead of the one that we saw is flammable. But it's all the way down this line. So people would have made these decisions all the way down the line. And joint enterprise has been used, a local joint enterprise has been used to put people away. Say if there was a stabbing, anyone who's involved in that situation can go to jail, even if they didn't do the actual stabbing themselves. And so the same criminal investigation needs to be done into this. The person who's ultimately responsible for signing these things off needs to go to jail, right? But everyone in this decision-making process who's involved in the murder of these people, because at best it's manslaughter, for the very least it's manslaughter. At most, this is a murder. This is a murder case, a collective murder case where decisions have been made that could have saved lives and they weren't made. And those people who made those decisions and chosen to let people die as opposed to save them need to go to jail. And it needs to be everyone who's been responsible for that process.
What does the public think of the government's response to this tragedy?
Slow, possibly inept. Could be to do with certain personalities within the government not able to actually show enough empathy, and so not getting in there quick and not getting the not being close enough to the people, I would say.
Theresa May she came and paid respects to the fire officers and the police officers. They weren't victims in Grenfell Tower. She needed to speak to the people who were affected, who ran out of the burning building, you know, who had family left behind in the burning building, and talk to. And then after being criticized, and she invited them to number 10. Hello? I mean, the answer is there.
Not good enough, personally. Not good enough, not quick enough to try and help the people that needed the help at the time.
Theresa May came and she had a private meeting with the fire department and with the police officers. She didn't want to meet up with the people. She didn't speak to any of the residents or any of the survivors and so on. And a lot of people there did take offense to that and were angry at that, due to the fact that it was very confusing, especially after the first few days. They don't know what exactly has happened. The numbers of the people that are missing, the people that have died, are not clear. So people were really angry and they demanded answers to their questions. And it just happened that a few politicians came down. They didn't have much to say. They didn't have an answer. They didn't have a solution. They kind of just relied on everything else. They relied on the fire department and the police to find something. So I think it's been a slow response so far in terms of finding a solution for these people, because for sure they have housings right now, but what's the long-term solution for these people?
It's been disgusting, to be honest. Like, you know, in a situation where people are dying and have died, to try and pretend that somehow, you know, it's a much smaller number of people, and to trickle out the information slowly, and to not take responsibility for what's happened. Everyone, when asked in all the interviews, you see them being asked, from Theresa May to Patrick Brown, to anyone who's in a position of responsibility, they've tried to pass it on to somebody else, right? Instead of, at no point has anyone been saying, yeah, you know what, this is wrong, we messed up, we're gonna take responsibility and we're gonna fix this. Everyone's just trying to push responsibility onto someone else, right? We've seen other disasters in the UK, stuff like the flooding, for example, when people will turn up, the army are brought out to try and fix this. And here, you see very clearly that that nothing was done to the scale of what it should have been. Even people who were trying to go in and help were being stopped by the police, you know? And that's people trying to save their families. You know, how can that be allowed to be okay? You know what I mean? And on top of that, it's like, you know, offering money, tiny sum of money, really. You know what I mean? You think about the amount of money that gets spent on security services for the government ministers and stuff like this, for the royal family and whatever else. In comparison to the money that Britain has, the money which has been offered to the families is nothing.
Many people believe that there is a cover-up surrounding the true number of people killed and the negligence of the council and the Tenancy Management Organisation. What does the public think?
It's a profit before people situation. So a lot of money invested in it, a lot of money to be made out of refurbishments, and I'm thinking that the tenants are maybe viewed as a bit of a nuisance if they rock the boat, you know.
Nobody ever listened to us in that block. In 40 odd years we lived there. The Tenancy Management Organisation, we all refused to have that cladding, but they still put it up anyway.
Why do you think they ignored you?
They always have. They've never been known to do anything any different. We refused that school to be built. We didn't want that school to be built, but they built it anyway.
Because no one cares about the poor really. It's always going to be remaining like that. So like if you're poor, then your words ain't going to be really spoken. However, if you're rich, then everyone's going to hear your word for it.
Who knows? I mean, who knows? They just ignore the poorer people, really. Social housing is ignored. That's all I can say about that, really.
The concerns were ignored because this is the standard. This is the standard in London and with the councils. I have lived in several councils within London. I've lived in different places, Ealing, Brent and so on, and that's just the standard. It's pretty sad that it takes a fire that big, that took so many people's lives, in order for the council to actually start moving and do something about it, because these complaints have been going on for 2 years. They have complained about an electricity box that was on the stairwell that actually was set on fire. They complained about it for 2 years and their complaints were ignored. There were no water sprinklers installed in that building, and they complained about that as well, and they were ignored. As a matter of fact, I've read an article on the newspaper that blamed that blamed the water sprinklers not being there on the actual residents, saying that the residents didn't want the water sprinklers to be there.
They were ignored because poor people in the UK are not a priority for the government, right? The law of this land is very, very clear, and the police service, for example, their responsibility is to protect life and to protect property. What that doesn't necessarily show is that the question is whose life and whose property, right? If we are people who don't own land and don't own property, the people who do, their property is being protected from us, right? And so when you see people who aren't landowners going through what those families have had to go through in Grenfell, it's clear that all of these legal measures, all of these things are not in place for those people, right? Like I said, all the way through the process, the Grenfell Action Group, you see it in their blog posts, it's documented, right? They've approached different organisations, the TMO, the council directly, government ministers, and said, this is unsafe. It's going to take something like what has happened for you to recognise this is wrong. And that's been happening for years, for years. And they've been ignored, and it's because it's poor people who are living here, people who don't have money, right? Who don't have status. If it had been in a more expensive housing complex, because it's an incredibly rich borough, right? But the issue is, it's the people who live there are clearly not a priority for the government or the local council or anyone involved in that decision-making process.
Would Labour's amendment to the government's housing and planning bill, aimed at improving housing law but rejected by 312 votes to 219, have prevented the fire? We don't know, but we do know the Grenfell Tower death toll keeps on rising. The first estimate was 6 deaths, quickly rising to 12. Then the figure exceeded 20, jumping to 58, and again to 79. Many claim the true death toll far exceeds 100. How worried is the public about the safety of other buildings in this area throughout London and the United Kingdom?
If it hadn't been for Grenfell, they wouldn't find that 600 towers across the country might have the same fate as Grenfell. So hopefully it can be fixed in time, but where are you going to put all those people?
Of course, they found cladding similar to that was on Grenfell Tower in other buildings. And I'm just glad they've got those people out. I've lost many, many friends from that block.
It's a possibility, and they need to be very vigilant to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Obviously asbestos is bad, and they used to use it for doing sort of insulation and stuff, and then it turns out that kills you. And obviously now I've had the same situation with fire. They've used cladding that kills people, and now they realised, oh, hang on a minute. Do you know what I mean? They would have thought they'd have thought the health and safety executives for this reason.
People were concerned around the area where the Grenfell Tower burned, and also around different areas around London, because a lot of these buildings, you find them around us wherever you go. They use the same material, they use the same cladding, they use the same insulation. So a lot of people are concerned. The first couple of days when we were out there in Grenfell, we saw people from other buildings who refused to go back home just because of the trauma. They saw a building just like theirs burned to the ground, burned for 24 hours, and people died in there. These people are terrified to go back into their buildings. So it's the same thing that has happened to this building, has the other residents all around London in fear, because this is social houses that we're speaking about. A lot of people live within these social houses. A lot of people are poor as well that live in these kind of conditions. So they're very concerned because they can't physically do anything about it. Therefore, the council or the people responsible of this whole social houses are the people that are supposed to build these places and provide safety for them. So if there wasn't any fire safety inside the building, how were these people allowed to live in there in the first place? And why were they moved so quickly after the refurbishment?
Idea is that the way that this country and a lot of countries around the world are run is that money is more important than people's lives, right? For them to build buildings all across the country, especially in London and major cities, because it is for housing poorer people. The amount of money which is, spent, the materials. I mean, some of the new builds, especially, and the stuff that have this cladding, the ones that have been, refurbished as they call it, you can put your hand through the wall with a tiny bit of force because the materials are so flimsy, right? And as we've seen, they're flammable, right? And the residents told you before that this, I spoke to a brother who was down there. He said whilst it was being installed, he took a piece, set it on fire, and it went up, and told the guy whilst he's sitting there, you can't put this in the house, and he was ignored, right? And so this is happening all across the country, right? And certain ministers have come out and been like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, trying to shift the blame onto a specific, party or a specific organisation. But in other councils run by different government, different parties, and different, people who've been elected, it's happening all across. It's all over, right? And again, it's only in poor places, in places where poor people live. In corporate buildings, right? There are sprinkler systems. There are alarms to alert people. Anywhere where people work, we've all done fire drills at work, right? But we don't have them here. I got a letter from my council, Hounslow Council, telling us that they're still not going to put in fire alarms because they don't want people to panic and they want people to stay put, right? This is what led people to die in Grenfell. This is why there are, hundreds of people up there still dead, right? And the government are trying to pretend that it's only, less than 100 people, when we know if you do the maths, there's at least 200, 300 people in there who have passed away. And it could happen to, it could have happened to any of these houses across the UK.
The residents complained many times before the tragedy about the safety of their building. Why, in the public's view, were their concerns ignored?
Where are the missing people? Where's the list of the 500 people that live in that building, 600 people that live in their building? Where's the list on the news? The list on the news shows about 10 people. Or 15 people. Okay, let's just say they show 30 people. Where's the rest? Where's the rest of the 500 people? Why is everyone walking around with missing on their, where is everyone? Where are the victims? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it? We're packing boxes, we're sending food, to who? They've died. So what they need to do is they need to pack these boxes and they need to sell them, not send it to Oxfam, or Red Cross, because Red Cross and Oxfam are not here helping us. This is the community that are helping us. So you're going to send all this stuff to Oxfam and Red Cross, and they don't deserve it. The people that deserve it are the people that died in that building because they wanted to make it look pretty, and it's an inferno. They burnt them. It was gone in 5 minutes. From 15 minutes it took to burn. Who's alive? Where are they? Where are the victims? I haven't met one. I've been here for 2 days. I live here. I haven't met one victim. I've met volunteers and I've met people that want to help, but I haven't met anybody, no victims. None of the people that I grew up with, I can't find anyone. Where are they? Where are they?
We have 68 homes that are provided in some buildings, as the government say, for some of the survivors. But then you have a 20-something else in the hospital. Put the undocumented ones who don't want to show up, who survived and they're hiding somewhere. So I say if 150 people survive Grenfell Tower, that's a lot. But what we don't know is the true figure of how many people were living there, because we understand that people subletted their flats and so forth and so forth. So unless we get the true number, we can only speculate.
Yeah, my viewpoint is it's way more than 200 or 300 people. That flat there, you can see how large that is compared to other flats across here. I used to live in that block down there, that tower block down there, and that had more than 200 residents, 300 residents. So for you to say that residents, all the residents in that building to remain alive and 79 people to die, I don't think that's true, no way near true.
Do you think it's a cover-up?
Maybe, it could be. It could be. Well, you can see from the way the police are hiding everything, they don't want us to take a look at nothing, so they're potentially hiding something big.
Maybe they haven't found all the bodies. I mean, who knows how many people have actually gone up onto the top floors or that to try and find out if there are people still up there or bodies still up there. So they won't know until they've had a really full investigation.
And I think some media outlets are also using that as an excuse to kind of cut off the story and go on into the next one and go on into the next one, because this is a massive case that we shouldn't ignore. We should never forget about this case right here, because it's linked up and it's related to so many other cases. Now, in terms of the numbers of the people that are missing and the numbers of people that have died, it was a 24-story building. And it's allegedly housed 300 plus people in that building. Therefore, if you do the maths of the people that have survived and the people that are reported dead and the people that are reported missing, there is a large number of people that weren't reported at all, not missing and not dead. So where are those people? The numbers are being kept small after it's been a week and a half right now, and the numbers are still being kept on hold. I think it's just a tool to kind of overlook the situation and to make it escalate, because if we come out today and say, you know what, 300 people have died in this fire, 300 is a massive number, it's going to keep the story going, it's going to get the people angry, it's going to get people asking more questions, and I don't think that's the thing that they want. They don't want people to have questions, they don't want people to be out there and protest to try to find the truth. So I think in terms of the numbers, there's something definitely disingenuous in this situation.
This isn't conspiracy theory, right? I've seen reports talking about, oh, this is a conspiracy or something, but it's been documented. As I said, the Grenfell Action Group were very, very clear of the steps that they've tried to take to get this sorted out. And there's been no response from housing associations. Paget Brown has tried to go on like it's not his fault, right? And act like he's been pushed out of this without ever taking responsibility, and now he's resigned, you know, and again, shirked his responsibility. We've seen, I mean, I've spoken to people on the ground down there, right, who know fire service members who are saying, we can't talk about this. We know the amount of bodies we found, right? We know the amount of people we've seen in there, and we can't talk about it. Which, you know, it's clear. I'm hearing people I know who work for certain organisations saying that there's been a gagging order put out on organisations, any organisation involved. But you can do the numbers. We know how many people have been found safe. We know how many people are reported dead. We know how many people are in hospitals. Once you take that away from the people who are supposed to be in there, the numbers are hundreds, 200, 300, maybe more, right? Because that's the people we know who lived there. It was Ramadan. People were there breaking fast and getting ready to start the next day with their families. People do that collectively. So people have gone around to see their families. I spoke to a brother who was down there on, who was part of the relief effort down there, and he said that's a real common thing. When you have Muslim families in there. The reason why they're not talking about this is because they know if they were to put this information out there, the anger that it was felt when people were down there protesting, the people down there every day trying to help the community, the anger would have, could have potentially overflowed, and they're trying to stop that from happening. And more importantly, they're trying to, again, not take responsibility for their failings, and again, that's all the way down this chain of responsibility.
John Cowley, managing director of the firm which produces the cladding at the centre of the Grenfell Tower debate, says the panels are not banned in the UK. At the same time, Chancellor Philip Hammond added the government wants to see technical advice, for example, on whether tower blocks should be retrofitted with sprinklers. Meanwhile, the cladding, the local authority, the Tenancy Management Organisation and the government all stand accused. A formal investigation has been promised, yet the local population fear a cover-up. They also insist the number killed is far higher than originally and officially claimed, and they want someone to be held responsible.